Welcome to the Cake Therapy Podcast, a slice of joy and healing with your host, Dr. Altricia Foster.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Cake Therapy Podcast, your slice of joy and healing. And as promised, the Cake Therapy Podcast will bring you the slice of joy and healing that you need at the right time. Today's slice of joy and healing is Valerie Van Galder. Did I get that right?
You did.
Good. She's the CEO of Depressed Cake Shop and committed to changing the conversations around mental health through baking. She is committed to fundraising for mental health organizations who's doing work like-minded work. She's an award-winning marketing executive with over 25 years of marketing and brand building experience at Fox Searchlight, Sony Screen Gems. She has run worldwide marketing for Sony's Columbia Pictures, leading the department to record-breaking results. In Galder's consulting practice, she has been involved in um, global marketing strategies and campaigns for clients, including 20th Century Fox, Sony Pictures, Disney, NBC Universal, Focus Features, Lionsgate, Amazon, and Apple, and now baking and mental health advocacy. I hope I did not miss anything. Valerie, can I call you Valerie
That
here
was plenty.
today?
Absolutely. You can call me Valerie. You can call me Val, whichever you like.
Yeah, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you.
I'm a fan of the work that you do
Thank
for
you.
in the field of mental health. And I think our listeners are really in for a treat. And whenever I have mental health advocates on, our listenership really does go up because I'm saying we spoke to Ella from Bake Wellbeing a couple weeks ago, and man, our listeners were really excited about her conversation with us. So I know that our listeners are yearning for conversations such as this. You are all about making the world a better place. And I love I love your influence in that space. And the Cake Therapy Foundation is really in alignment with the work that you do. We are doing and baking women and girls into a much better place through teaching them how to bake. So thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So a quick mental health check-in that I usually do in this space is, how are you doing? How are you doing?
I am doing well, thank you. As you said, I work in marketing many years ago, and it's one of the reasons the Depressed Cake Shop became, a big pastime of mine. I
Mm-hmm.
left my job to take care of my father, who had had a psychotic break after my mother's death. So I do freelance marketing now, and a part of that is to maintain my own mental health and to
Mm-hmm.
manage my stress levels because too much stress is bad for me. So I'm doing well. I'm doing some film consulting, working with Depressed Cake Shop and
Mm-hmm.
walking my dog and playing tennis and enjoying nature and doing all the things that kind of keep my mental health in check. So yeah, today my mental health is good.
Oh, that's great. Often I see people and I ask like how they're doing, and I really, really want to be intentional about checking in. How important it is, do you think it is that we are honest with ourselves and really acknowledge in any given moment the truth about how we're feeling emotionally?
I think it's really important because I think one of the reasons I got involved and decided I wanted to become a mental health advocate was seeing how shame-filled my parents' life was since the day they were married. My father clearly was struggling with mental health issues his whole life, but it
Mm-hmm.
was kept hidden from me, my family, my sisters, most of my mom's community because she felt very ashamed of it because our dad was a very high functioning, successful, great father, built a business, we had a lovely life, but he had this quiet underpinning issue his entire life, I
Mm-hmm.
guess. I didn't know a lot about it until after they passed away, that he probably had suffered from bipolar disorder with which could turn into psychotic depression. And so I think the fact that they could never talk to my sisters or I about that, or my mother could never get any support in, keeping my father's health, stable to the best of her abilities, was
Mhm.
one of the reasons I wanted to talk about it. And I wanted to tell my story and my family story so that other people who might be suffering these things would actually go and get help and look for treatment sooner, because I think the sooner you get treatment for your mental health, the sooner you start to understand what some of your underlying health issues are, the better chance you have a full and productive life. And my dad's life
Mhm.
went up and down like this because he never quite probably, invested enough in his own mental health, because I think once it stabilized, he'd just go back to whatever, his life, and didn't ever get like a, holistic treatment that kept him healthy throughout his life, as we saw, when my mother passed away. So I guess a
Mhm.
long way of saying I think it's really important when you're feeling tired, when you're feeling stressed, when you notice your anxiety levels are rising, that, you check in with yourself and perhaps go see a doctor. And I think the more people like us talk about that, the more people say, huh, maybe, the bad dreams I'm having at night, or the fact I can't get out of bed, or that I'm very sleepless, maybe that's an underlying mental health issue that I should go get checked out. In the same way you would go get an irregular heartbeat checked out, or, if
Right.
you have a strange mole on your arm, like we've done a really
Mhm.
good job at as a culture and as a country, publicizing, heart attacks and skin cancer, and all those kinds of things that we talk about all the time, to make sure you go and, catch those things before they become, more problematic. So I think
Yeah.
mental health needs to rise up to that level of visibility.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned here your mom, your dad, your sister. Tell me a little bit more about who Valerie is, One, I'm curious about growing up, what led you to PR and movie marketing and that kind of stuff. And then we dive into the mental health and baking aspect of it.
Oh my gosh,
Mhm.
that's a long story because I'm old. Who am I? Okay, I am the firstborn child of my parents. She was from Chicago, he was from Oklahoma. They both were first generation immigrants who really grew up with nothing. My mother was an orphan by the time she was 18. She didn't think she'd ever marry. She thought she was going to have to, she was actually going to be thinking about moving to New York and going to work in New York. And she met my father and they got married and they had me. And then 6 months later, he wanted to move to California. So they moved away from Chicago, to California when I was a baby, and things were going pretty well. And then I guess I was a baby, but then they had another daughter, my sister Marcy, who was born a little less than 2 years later. And
Mhm.
then my mother became pregnant again unexpectedly with her third child, my sister Jody, and that pregnancy was unexpected. And also, my sister was born quite premature, and in the '60s, like there was no NICU, so that was a big um, it was a big I think it was probably a big stress on my family. If I look back and see
Mhm.
kind of what happened to my dad after that, I think 3 children under the age of 3, new business. He had just moved to California. He was an entrepreneur. And what I now know that I did not know until after they passed away is that he had a psychotic break when I was 4, and he was institutionalized and he received electroshock therapy, which is what they called it at the time. And no one ever told
Mhm.
us this. And
Right.
so I mean, yeah, you really want to get into this. So I've really kind of excavated myself and my personality and some of my issues, having been discovered that data point about my family, and realized
Mhm.
I've been really anxious and socially awkward and strange probably since about that time. I think I was a pretty confident little baby. And I think my dad leaving and it not being explained to me, while I don't remember it on a conscious level, I think subconsciously I developed real anxiety and a lot of abandonment. Like I was always worried people were
Okay.
going to leave and I was going to be alone. And I didn't
Mhm.
know why. No one ever explained, well, it might have been because when you were 4, your dad went to a mental hospital and your mother was home alone with 3 children and no
Mhm.
support system in California. So, I made it through childhood. I was quite shy and I had a lot of, I was really socially awkward, but I was smart. And then I got to UCLA and socially awkward still, and never could quite fit in with everybody else, and always felt like I was going to have a strange life, and I was okay with that. And then one day I met someone who worked in a PR firm. He was an intern. He was a friend of mine. So I'm trying to make the story short. And my mother and father kept telling me I had to go get an internship because I was an English major and I wasn't never get a job. They just I was hardwired for anxiety. They were constantly telling me all the things that were going to go wrong with my life, which was not helpful.
Mhm.
And in a loving way, they loved me. So anyway, I met this friend of mine one day and said, "What are you up to?" And he said, "Well, I'm an intern at this PR firm." I said, "Oh, that sounds fun. That's Hollywood. I like movies. Can I come with you?" So I wandered into this
Mhm.
PR firm, public relations, for those who don't know what PR is, and I ended up in the music division because a woman who was an assistant there said, "Oh, you seem like a nice, smart girl. Do you want to be my intern?" I said, "I do." So then I just stayed there for a long time. And at some point, someone said, like, "Why are you here?" And I said, "Oh, I'm an intern." She's like, "You're not. You need to fill out forms." Like, and I said, "I really like it here, and I'm going to graduate anyway, and you don't have to pay me because I'm really enjoying being a volunteer." So I ended up that ended up being my first job, and it turned out, as shy as I was really good at talking people into things on the phone. Like I had a
Hmm.
good way of persuading people to do what I wanted them to do, which is what PR is. It's getting people to write an article about your project. So I did that for many years, and then, then la la la, and I just had a good career, and I was really enthusiastic and excited. So I ended up being very blessed in my career and achieving all the things you talked about at the top of this conversation. But when my dad had his third psychotic break that I knew about of his life, which was when my mother passed away, about a year into that, I just couldn't do my job anymore. My husband
Hmm.
lived in London, my sisters weren't here to support me, and I was just really burned out. So I kind of had a little breakdown myself, and I took some time off. And then at some point, a few years later, I started baking. I'd always baked, but I'd always wanted to learn to decorate cakes. So I was in London visiting my husband, and cake pops had just been invented. And I thought, I'm going to make cake pops. I couldn't figure out how to do it because I'm a bad cake decorator. And it turned out there was a school in England, a few tube stops away from my house, where you could take cake lessons. And I was bored. I didn't have a job, and I didn't have any friends in London. And so I said, I'm going to go take some cake lessons. And anyway, so that's
Hmm.
how we ended up at Depressed Cake Shop. So I became very, very, very obsessed with decorating cakes. I took tons. I've always managed my mental health. I now know through behavioral activation, which is arts and crafts.
Hmm.
And so that's what I did. I started taking cake lessons. I read about the Depressed Cake Shop. It was supposed to be a one-day pop-up in England. I couldn't participate because I had to go back to LA because my dad was not feeling well. But so many bakers were intrigued by this idea that a Facebook group grew around it, and it started popping up. So San Francisco, someone popped up, and I met a woman in LA on this group. I said, I don't know why, but I'm so drawn to the idea of baking cake and supporting the National Alliance for Mental Illness, which is an organization that had been tried to be very supportive to me when my dad was ill, but I didn't really have time to even take advantage of their services, which was peer support. And there's just a wonderful organization. I said, let's raise money for them. And so we did it.
Yeah.
We did a one-day pop-up here, and it changed my life. And so the original founder didn't want to continue on. We built the website, social media kind of grew up, Instagram, became more of a force. So it's just really me and my computer. But me and my computer, we've had over 200 shops around the world. We've raised money over $400,000. We stopped counting at some point because COVID
Yeah.
sort of slowed things down. But yeah, so hundreds of thousands of dollars have been raised. It's a project that it kind of ebbs and flows with my schedule, to be honest with you,
Hmm.
because
Okay.
right now I'm working back in film. So, the website's always there. I've done a
Hmm.
lot of things like podcasts. My sister and I were the keynote speakers at the Mental Health Marketing Festival in Tennessee this year. So now, more than baking and popping up shops, I try and do
Right.
things like this, like advocate for other people to bake and pop up shops. Because am I just filibustering too much? Sorry, I just
No,
like
no.
I okay, is it okay? Because
Yeah.
I just could talk in a torrent. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
That's okay.
okay, because I realized you asked one question, I've been talking for 10 minutes. Okay, so I'm
Mhm.
getting this is my TED talk. So, the reason I love talking to people like you is you're also working in this space, and you realize the therapeutic effects and nature of baking, which I think I want to spread the word far and wide because it's such an easy way to make yourself feel better. Baking a cake and giving it to
Absolutely.
someone it's got a magical quality in terms of how it makes me feel and how I know it makes others feel that I want other people to be
Hmm.
able to avail themselves of because it's such a simple thing to do.
Hmm.
But also I like talking about it because just like me, all I did was pop up a shop with a friend. So it's like the barrier to entry I've kept very low. We'd like you to have elements of gray because that's kind of our color palette to represent that, there's a gray cloud that depression casts over your life, over a beautiful
Hmm.
world. But I want people to feel really included in this. If you want to do this as a card table in front of your house, if you want to do it with your kids at their school, one of the women who I met through the project, it was her daughter's bat mitzvah project. And I also don't take any money in, even though we are a registered charity. The money goes
Hmm.
directly into the communities where the pop-ups happen because I
Hmm.
know how hard it is to raise money for local charities. My sister runs a homeless shelter in Boise, so I'm well aware. I have a relative who's raising money all day long. So it's a very special and hippie-ish project. I run it like the hippie I am. It's really based a lot on trust. We trust that you're going to you know, represent us beautifully. If we loan you
Mm-hmm.
our name and our logo for your pop-up, we trust that you're going to work with a registered mental health charity and work with them, and not only to support and promote their work, but to maybe raise some money for them. And that's what it is. It's very simple. It's very sweet. We have a website that can walk you through anything. Anyone who's listening and is interested. And I
Yeah.
answer all the emails. I'm always here if you have questions. And it changed my life. I think it saved my life. It's been an incredible project. I've met people all over the world personally because of the project that have
Mm-hmm.
enhanced my life. And I know they all have as well. It's created this beautiful community around it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Do you think then that it was your proximity to the mental health, like the trauma that you experienced with your father getting ill, and even your father's illness, in turn leading to you feeling low and gray, that led you into this space of advocacy? Because I read where you say you're not an activist, you're an advocate. Tell us
Yeah.
more about that.
I think, it goes back to when you asked me, I ended up in PR. I think what I've learned through my career is that spreading stories can change the world. It's like if you tell a story, and you tell a story with compassion, or a story that can actually help someone,
Mm-hmm.
you can impact culture. So that's what I do professionally. I think someone like me who, if you don't know me well, and if I wasn't so honest and you Googled me, you'd think, wow, she's had the perfect life. She had all these big jobs and those pictures of her with nice, hairstyles and professional headshots. And,
Yeah.
she was on this list and she was powerful and she was on that list and she won these awards. And it all looks really good on paper. And a lot of it is, but there was a lot of trauma, struggle, and sadness in between all the happy stories. And so I want people to realize that, like, so many people feel, less than, or like, their life isn't adding up to everyone else's. And social media hasn't helped that because we spend our lives only posting about our trumps and our happy days and our great
Mm-hmm.
Christmases with our families. And a lot of people are really lonely and they're struggling. And so advocacy and activism kind of came naturally to me. I was, brought up in a family that was taught we were supposed to give back to our community. Okay, I've been an activist my whole life. My parents really instilled that in us to, look out for the people that didn't necessarily have as much as you do. But when I was tasked with my sister with taking care of my father and getting him mental health assistance and getting him into the hospital and getting him therapy, it was really challenging. And I was really taken and struck by the fact that I had to basically call the people at the movie studio to try and help me get a bed at the hospital because someone who ran a movie studio's name was on the top of the building.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, if someone like me can't get their dad into a hospital, what if they don't have my big mouth and they don't talk people into everything and they don't have extended healthcare? And so I
Mm-hmm.
thought, I just want to do my part to raise money and awareness for organizations that are working in this space, so that I didn't want another daughter like me, because I really
Mm-hmm.
lost everything. I lost my career. It just, like, it had long lasting effects, my dad's illness, because he was ill for so long and I was here on my own. My sisters were out of state with small children. So I thought, some days there's going to be a woman like me and she's going to have a big job and she's going to have a family, and she's also going to be able to manage all of those things because mental health care is going to be available and accessible and hopefully affordable. So I just wanted to do my part in that space. And I also wanted to meet other people who were going through what I was going through, because it was quite lonely and scary.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me feel much less alone. And I wanted other people to feel less alone. So I wanted, kind of continue that virtuous cycle of telling other people my story so that they don't
Mm-hmm.
feel so scared. And I think the other thing I sort of started to touch on is, now in the world where social media is really harming our young people's mental health, I want to make sure that I do my part to, help this next generation talk about their feelings. And I think in the 14, 15 years since my dad became ill in 2009, things have really, 2008, geez, things have really changed. Like, people talk about this
Yeah.
openly. There is my company, I had an executive coach and they told me to ask for compassionate leave, and my company wouldn't give me compassionate leave. And I recently wrote an article, and someone who works at that company I used to work at texted me on LinkedIn, and she said, I just want to tell you I read that article, and I just want you to also know that I'm on compassionate leave from my old company. I was just like, I'm so happy that they now have compassionate leave, because it's important to keep a good workforce working. You need to, understand that sometimes people have pressures that they need to deal with at home.
Absolutely. And this resonates with me so much because I had to I am the primary caregiver of my mom, who's like suffering stage 3
I
dementia,
read that.
and
Yeah.
had to walk away from a lot of it, like, a lot of the things that I achieved So I definitely, this story does resonate with me, because I'm telling you, like, I am really experiencing a daily heartbreak of
Mm,
watching my mom. Like, I'm grieving daily.
I
So I
know.
have a lot of things that I'm baking through, and it's really the baking that's actually keeping me together. So I can that this does resonate with me, with you finding your baking. And it further solidifies for me, because when I wrote my book, Cake Therapy: How Baking Changed My Life, it wasn't the story of my mom having dementia, because I did not foreshadow this happening. I was baking through traumas that happened to me in the past, but didn't realize that I would have had to gone back to these tools to actually bake through surviving the slow heartbreak of watching dementia steal my mom away. So this definitely resonates with me. So thank you for sharing that and stepping into the light and recognizing that, for you to be alive and standing, that you needed to take care of yourself, and you found an outlet. So kudos to you. Because
Kudos
I
back to
found.
you.
Thank
Yes,
you.
I read that, and I'm sending you all the love because I think what people don't realize is, and I have a friend I have friends whose mother's not well right now. I
Hmm.
don't know how you feel, but I feel like it's harder for me to have someone I love suffering than myself because you're so worried. Like, I don't think people who have never been a caregiver understand that, like, you wake up in the middle of the night and you wonder if they're okay and you wonder what's going to happen in the morning. And because it's completely out of your control.
Yeah.
Where, like, with, if when I had a broken shoulder, I was like, oh, my shoulder hurts. Okay, I'll take a pill. But it was just me.
Hmm.
Like, I wasn't worried about myself. I was just like, but worrying about someone who you love, a parent. And I think so many people, and I don't know how old you are, but in my generation are now, I lost my parents a little bit younger. They were a bit older when they had me, but our generation is going to go through this and we don't talk about it enough and we don't create support for the caregivers. And, and it
Yeah.
comes as a terrible shock. I'm sure you felt when suddenly you're like the person who, took care of you, suddenly the tables are turned and our
Yeah.
society needs to really support people because there's going to be more of us.
Oh, there's already so many more of us, right? And I
Yeah.
think it's the us's who are creating the space to really talk about it freely, because we know that if we don't talk about it, what it's going to ultimately do to us,
Yeah.
and for me, this is not this is my only parent. It's the only parent I've ever
I'm
had.
so sorry.
And as I was like climbing up this ladder of success, I'm thinking that this poor lady who gave up everything for me would now be reaping the fruits of my labor. But then she can't enjoy a moment of this because of depression and
Mm,
dementia. So it's
yeah.
really heartbreaking for me. But
Oh, no,
hearing
I understand. I mean, I'm just sending you all the love because until someone has been through this, I understand on a very cellular level what you're saying, everything that they give up everything for us, and that just as you're kind of getting to that point where you're about to like spring into, the kind of most productive part of your life,
yeah,
yet you need to take care of them. And people, I'm sure they say this to you, but people used to say to me, "You're such a good daughter." I was like, what choice do I have? Like, they're my parents. Like, what am I going to
hmm,
do?
yeah,
So yeah, it's a big issue. I'm
hmm.
really sorry. I send you a lot of love.
Thank you so much. And people don't realize, like, as they're taking care of these elderly parents, that they too need to take care of themselves. And that is truly one of the messages that the foundation and the work that you're doing is sending. Like, listen, find an outlet. If you don't believe that talk therapy is the answer, there are other art forms that will really get you to the place that you need to get to.
Yes, exactly. And also try, I think the thing about mental health that's challenging is there's so many different modalities. There's talk therapy,
Hmm.
there's CBT, there's EMDR, there's there is ECT, which is recommended for someone like my father who was very ill and medication resistant, which seemed, scary at the time. But when I met with
Right.
the head of the hospital, they said, well, this is a treatment that works for someone like your dad, but it's very confusing. And also, I'm sure you appreciate this statement I'm about to make. When you're depressed, it's really hard to get help for yourself because the
Yeah.
depression tells you you're never going to get better. So people who have mental health issues really need advocates and
Yeah.
advocacy. It's another reason to talk about it and to keep an eye on your family members because they're not going to tell you they're depressed. Your brain tells you that my dad thought he was completely rational. He didn't
Yeah.
realize that he was sick, and that's what made it even more challenging.
Mm-hmm. And the thing about it is, I don't realize when I'm the most stressed until I'm actually in the kitchen and seeing how hard I'm baking, because I'm feeling the pressure that I need to release this,
Yeah.
and I am putting it into the cakes. So it's really an interesting concept of and an interesting response to trauma and burdens that
And
you're
it
facing daily.
works,
It
right?
does work,
I
yes.
haven't baked in a long time because I've been moving, and so all my stuff is. And then the other day, this is a sweet story actually. This store, there was a bakery in LA called Sweet Lady Jane that was very legendary and had been here for 100
Hmm.
years, and everybody loved it. And then it just suddenly New Year's Day it just closed. It was and people were literally grieving, like on
Right. Hmm.
on social media, how much they miss this bakery, and they had this famous three berry cake. So I Googled it because they kept the recipe quite carefully guarded. And I
Yeah.
went on my Instagram page and I said, "Hey, a depressed cake shop." I was like, "If anyone lives near me and they want a cake, if you make a donation to Depressed Cake Shop, I didn't care what size it was, I'll make you this cake because I think I know how." And this woman instantly sent me $250, and I was like, "Wow, that was so generous. Thank you."
Yeah.
So, and only one person did, which is fine because I didn't have a lot of time to bake a cake, but I
Yeah.
hadn't baked in a long time, and I had to do that cake and a birthday cake for friends coincidentally. And I got
Hmm.
in the kitchen, and to your point, I was like, "Gosh, I really missed this." I didn't realize how much I
Hmm.
love baking and decorating and thinking about what the cake's gonna look like and figuring out how to replicate the Sweet Lady Jane cake. But the sweetest part of the story is that the woman who bought the cake shared with me, oh gosh, she has her no, she actually she messaged me, so this is confidential. Okay. She
Yeah.
shared with me that she was celebrating her 30th year of sobriety with her family that night. So the cake just had
Hmm.
so many layers of love in it, like that I was really gratified she had supported our charity. I was so happy that I could create something for her to celebrate with her family. And so I have like mugs and some, little goodies I used to make her, yeah, like I said, Depressed Cake Shop ebbs and flows. So I made her a little goodie bag and she came to my house and I gave her a hug. And I thought, wow, this like is just a very minuscule example of what I try and tell people, which is like two people's lives were impacted from the simple act of making a cake. Mine,
Yeah.
because I felt so grateful to be able to help her enhance her experience with a cake that was beautiful that she was excited about. And but also it
Hmm.
was great for me just to spend the time making it and thinking about her. And so I recommend everybody make cakes for people. I think it's the way forward for all of us.
Yeah, like we often like there's such happy experiences that are associated with like making cakes, right? We make
Yeah.
cakes for parties and weddings. So I'm curious to know, like, the whole concept of the depressed cake shop, making great cakes. Where did that come from?
It came from the original founder. She is a woman named Emma Thomas. I haven't talked about her. I haven't thought about her. So Emma Thomas. Yeah, she goes by Miss Cakehead. So in that period, when I was telling you about 10 years ago, when or 11 years ago now, when I started baking all the time, I would read. I like to read and like research and meet people. So I was just interested in anything to do with cake, and I read that this woman was doing this one day pop up in London. And because of she has a very different personality than I do. She's really like clever and well, I'm clever and creative, but she's a little bit more, that's what I'm looking for. She works in a little more macabre space than I do on a lot of her
Mm-hmm.
projects. So she
Okay.
came up with the idea, which I think was brilliant, that if the cakes were gray and they weren't pretty, it wouldn't be like any other bake sale. It would gain media attention because the cakes were telling the story of the gray life of a depression. And she was right.
Mm-hmm.
And so people thought, well, gray's ugly, but actually I have a news clip where the woman says, that it's actually quite beautiful, the shades of gray. And I think it's also, if you want to kind of, stretch the metaphor, it's like all the moods of our lives make us who we are. And, it's like an Inside Out, that movie, we have joy and we have sadness. And it's just, I think it's like a cake. I'm going to make a really bad, ready for this metaphor or
Mm-hmm.
analogy? So in the recipe of your life, if you're a cake, there's going to be days when you have sadness and joy and maybe anxiety. But if you can somehow, change put more joy in your cake and less anxiety, then, the recipe for your life will be better. And so I think she was really trying to
Mm-hmm.
use the gray cake as a metaphor for untreated depression and what the world feels like, because it really does feel gray.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
what we did after that first shot to kind of extend it is we said gray with a pop of color, and then the
Mm-hmm.
pop of color could represent the hope. But
Yeah.
as I said, the other thing I do, because I want to encourage as many people as possible to participate in the project. If you just want to make pink cake and you want to call yourself Depressed Cake Shop, go right ahead. Like, I don't want to stop anyone, because a lot of the times I've noticed people who are drawn to this particular project often are suffering with mental health issues themselves. And as you and I
Mm-hmm.
both know, I know for sure, when you're not feeling well with a mental health issue, you're tired. So the last thing I want to do is give someone who's excited about this project a whole bunch of hurdles to jump over that make it
Mm-hmm.
harder. So it's something that evolved over time, to be a little bit less prescriptive, um, from the original
Yeah.
brief that Emma came up with.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about like collaborations
Uh-huh.
across what does one have to do if they wanted to collaborate or set up a depressed bake shop?
Okay, well, if they want to collaborate with me, we tend, I mean, I'm happy to collaborate with anyone who wants to collaborate. Like, if a baker called and said, I want you to do a depressed cake shop and we live in LA, that would be fun. But
Mm-hmm.
in terms of just the thing that about it is, like, you can do it on your own anywhere you want. So, like, if you wake up and you say, I want to do a depressed cake shop, you go to our website. We have all kinds of forms to fill out. Not forms, sorry, that's a lie. We have things to print out if you want a
Mm-hmm.
letter to, like, send to bakeries. We have downloadable, yeah, logos and things. You want to use our logo. A lot of times people make their own logo. It's really like, I want people to make it theirs. The only thing I ask that they do is they align with a national mental health charity, or even a local one that is,
Mm-hmm.
registered as a charity, and that all the money they raise goes to that charity. And then the nice thing that also makes it better is if they pair up with the charity, so the charity can actually be on site and they can
Mm-hmm.
bring literature or talk to people who are coming to the to the depressed cake shop about the work that they're doing.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of examples of it on our website. We have a whole thing called Past Shops, and you can see which charities were involved. The one that's the most active, and they have their own Instagram page because of it, is a charity in Portland, Oregon called Baby Blues Connection.
Okay.
And her name's Angie Fitzpatrick. She's on our board. She loves the Press Cake Shop. So it is their major fundraiser, and they do 4 pop-ups a year. And it's very, what's the word I'm looking for? Professional is the wrong word, but it feels very, she has a system that's really, really effective and efficient. They do it at the same place every time. It's a space called Opal 28. They've been amazing partners to us. The money goes to her charity. She's the executive director of the charity, and she's like the gold standard. In Austin, Texas, actually, interestingly, and I've always thought this was a great idea that other people should do. A woman named Karen Reynes, who worked at National Alliance for Mental Illness, NAMI Central Texas branch,
Mm-hmm.
she would do during Mental Health Month, she would ask all the bakeries in Austin to each create one depressed cake shop item. So, like, maybe a great donut or a great cupcake or great cookies, and sell those for the month of May, and then have literature inside the bake shop. So this is bricks and mortar, about NAMI, so that they would raise money, and then the money would all go to NAMI, and they'd raise awareness. And one year, there's a cake shop called Skull and Cake Bones, and one of the founders has mental health issues and is very open about it. So they made their cake shop the depressed cake shop for the whole month. And I actually went for a week and stayed at their house, and we did all kinds of fun activities. We did like a therapeutic knitting night. There's an organization I really love called Not Alone Notes, which was started by 2 young women. Um, if you have OCD, you can send, and they'll send you a note of support. So
Mm-hmm.
we did an arts and crafts night, and we made a whole bunch of note cards and sent them to Not Alone Notes. And we did a cupcake decorating thing one night. So it's very open. I mean, what I love about it, because I'm a creative person, is
Mm-hmm.
it benefits anyone who wants to create what they want out of it. As long as stick to a few really simple guidelines, it's there for everyone. It's like I said, it's a very hippie project. It's like, the more the merrier. Please join us. Please be part of our merry band. And I met Ella because, we found each other online, and now we're friends in real life, and she's on my board, and I've met her in London, and I'll see her again when I go there this week. So it's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful organization. And
Yeah.
there's wonderful people all over the world who have touched it.
Yeah. I in our conversations here, I realized, well, I've known it, but for our listeners, is for them to realize that there's not a one size fits all response to how you treat mental health and traumas, right? What do you think the world is missing when it comes to embracing alternate forms of therapy in response to their mental health?
A good question. I mean, I can only speak for myself. Um, I mean, I think, ow, oh my gosh, I just got a cramp in my leg. I think, kind of want to, well, I'm not going to answer that question directly. I'll get to it, but I do want to say one thing that I think would be helpful. I think we need to get started with all of this in childhood. I think a lot of my issues were because my parents did not have the tools to understand how to raise mentally healthy children, not through any
Mhm.
fault of their own. You know, they'd been born in the 20s and 30s. They came from nothing. They didn't have a lot of support here. There was, you know, no one gave my mother prenatal mental health care. It's, you know, they just didn't. And so I think what would really benefit our society is if we start thinking about the mental health of our children really early. So, you know,
Mhm.
the early motherhood, you know, like that bond with the mother. When my mother had the three children, I think that was, I can, you know, see kind of some of the things that happened in our family as the years went on.
Mhm.
In terms of she was so overwhelmed with the three of us that, you know, it was, I'm sure it was a very challenging life for her. And so
Yeah.
I have a dog, this puppy, and the puppy, I got her during COVID, so she went straight from the people's house where she had been born, you know, because they owned the mother, and she slept with the little girl
Mhm.
on the bed, and the little girl came and handed her to me, and I'd had 3 of the same I can sorry, I can actually explain this based on my dogs. So I've had 3
Mhm.
beagles in a row. The first beagle I got, I was young with my boyfriend, I had a job, I put her in the kitchen with a bowl of food, and I left, and the dog lost her mind. She never was trained properly, she ran away all the time, she chewed through the furniture, she ate all my clothes, she was so badly behaved, she bit people, but I loved her and I kept her my whole life. She was a very flawed and mentally challenged dog. And
Mhm.
the second dog, I thought, okay, well, I kind of learned from the first dog. So the second dog, I brought her to work every day because my boss let her. I took her to daycare so she was, you know, could be more socialized with the dogs. I got a dog walker for when I was at work, and she was a much better dog. She didn't run away as much as that dog did. She didn't like other dogs, but other than that, she was a perfect dog. She was wonderful with children. We're the first dog had bit children. And I
Yeah.
was like, okay, I've nailed this dog thing. And then I got my third dog, and that dog was the first time I hadn't had a full-time job. So I just stayed home and bonded with my puppy. And this puppy is like, people stop me in the street. They're like, what is that dog? She is confident. She is calm. She's generous with her toys, where my second dog was very toy possessive.
Mhm.
She's just an angel. And she's an angel because I I trained her. Like, you know, I put
Mhm.
her, I crate trained her, where I didn't crate train my first dog. I did crate train my second dog. So this one's so crate trained. So then I read a bunch of books, even though it was my third beagle. And one of the books said, feed your dog in the crate. So I would do this thing where I'd say, Hazel, your table's ready. And she'd go into her crate and she'd sit and she'd eat her dinner. So now if I say, Hazel, go in your crate, she just walks in there and takes a toy and goes to bed. And she can stay in
Yeah.
there for hours. And it really has made being a dog owner an absolute pleasure.
Mhm.
But I've given a lot of thought to how that equates to a human. And I thought, wow, I just had more resources in some ways to train my dog than I think anyone gives parents. They just send a baby home. They're like, good luck.
Mhm.
And they tell you about the bottles and the diapers and the food, but they don't say, hold your baby close when she's crying or he's crying. Don't leave it in the bed and let it cry itself to sleep. That's not a good thing.
Yeah.
Don't create fear that, eventually I think really metastasizes into some of these mental health issues that we see people walking around with. So I would love that we would help mothers and fathers, kind of get on board with it early.
Mhm.
But if you do have mental health issues, it isn't one size fits all. Therapy isn't for everybody. Some people need medication. So I think it's also destigmatizing and demystifying that whatever works for you. For me, it was I tried medication because I got quite depressed at a point in my life. I tried medication a few different times. And at some point, I realized, okay, I think I understand what my trauma is. And I think if I take care of myself through exercise and having a dog and seeing my
Mhm.
friends and minimizing my stress, that works for me. Now, will it work
Yeah.
forever? I don't know. But, and I would never say someone else shouldn't take medication. I think you should do what's right for you. But, sometimes it takes a minute to figure it all out. So I think the other thing I would say, having been a patient and a daughter of a patient, is have a little patience with yourself because
Yeah.
it does take time to work. It's not like a headache medicine where you take a aspirin and it goes away. And I
Mhm.
think, sorry, I'm talking way so much, but I think that's what's so challenging about it is your brain keeps telling you you're never going to get better and that the pills aren't working. And so it requires sometimes an outside advocate to get you to take the pills until they finally kick in. Because
Mhm.
there's no instant cure, unfortunately, for deep mental health issues. It's a
Yeah.
journey.
So you say that the depressed cake shop is there for everyone, and you want everyone to join and to come along. What is actually in the pipeline for the depressed cake shop right now, and what do you hope
Oh.
the future?
Uh, right now, it's the website's there and it's kind of living as a little grassroots effort. I've been really busy with my life and my work and so it's like it ebbs and flows depending on my schedule.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, my hopes for it are honestly that someone would come and take it over and become more of an executive director and make it a full-time job so that we could raise a little bit of money to have a salary for someone. I
Mm-hmm.
haven't done any fundraising because I don't want to really do anything. I don't want to be paid for my work and I don't want to take in a lot of money that we then have to report back to the government. So I basically any money that comes in goes back out. But I don't know. I think, people have come and gone over the years and I've had an assistant at some point. What do I want it to be? I mean, I think I want it to be kind of what it is, but I would love it to have more notoriety so more people would get involved because I do think
Mm-hmm.
that they just, the effort of popping up a shop and getting that like that buzz because it really is a buzz. People do. I'd
Yeah.
really recommend you do it at least once because it really is the most fun I've ever had. But at some point I burned out on it because you have to go organize the bakers and I had like an entire garage full of cake. I mean, I whenever I do anything, I go hard. So I just personally got tired of. I didn't want to be like a cake shop owner. So after my last really big one where I like rented a cake shop and that was in 2017, I haven't done a lot of pop-ups myself,
Mm-hmm.
but I encourage anyone to do one because honestly, I got a little too excited. I did a whole bunch. At some point, I lost a little bit of energy around it. But I think try and you do a cake shop in your neighborhood, or maybe go
Mm-hmm.
to your child's school and just have them decorate cookies and talk to them about their feelings. Like there's so many ways to use baking, and there's also since I started doing it, there's books like yours. There's so many books in this space, about baking your mind off it and Jack Hazan just wrote one, Mind Over Batter. And so, there's a whole literature like movement around why this is so good for you. So I think,
Yeah.
get yourself some of the books. Buy Dr. Fisher's Foster. Sorry, I can't read.
Yeah.
Buy Dr. Foster's. It looks like Fisher. It's not her name. Buy Dr. Foster's book. Go out and read about how cake therapy can save and help you and help others. And
Yeah.
yeah, I just think people like us just have to keep talking about it. I think your podcast is going to do a big service talking to people like me and Ella and everyone else you have in the pipeline.
Absolutely. I'm hoping that the podcast will really help to authenticate that this is really a true art form that will really can change people's lives, you know?
It's changed
Um,
mine. I'm the poster child.
oh, there we go. I'm glad that you feel that way. So before we go,
Yeah.
um, I want you to speak to our listeners, especially the girls who are
Okay.
listening and who have been through trauma. They've been in and out of foster care, been in and out of the justice system, the criminal justice system, and they're feeling hopeless.
Mm.
What is your message to them today?
Oh my goodness. Excellent question. My message to them today is that while their childhood didn't necessarily hand them all the tools it would be that are beneficial to launching yourself into life, finding people like you and your project and aligning yourself. There are people out there who care and who do want to work with children who didn't have the same advantages that some other people had, in their childhood. Um, oh my gosh, I know I'm not being very articulate. And there are organizations like yours, and there's another one in England called the Luminary Bakery. There are places where people want to help, you find your skills. And so if I think just go into your heart because everybody's different and find something you love and see if there's a way you can align with someone like you or like me, because we're out in the world to help
Mm-hmm.
support that spark you have inside of yourself. And there's some really wonderful organizations. My friends are going to run an organization called A Sense of Home, and they're in LA, and I think they're also branching into New York. And what they do for foster youth is when they are aged out and they have their first apartment, they go and furnish it. It's like extreme home makeover for foster
Mm-hmm.
kids. So
Yeah.
there are people out there who really care. It's just you have to find access to them. And maybe put a link to what's called a sense of home on your website, and
Hmm.
and let people know that in LA and New York that is something that's available for foster kids. And
Absolutely.
they're very supportive of them throughout the journey. They don't just give them an apartment and say goodbye. So it's been I'm really proud of my friends, and I think that's a beautiful organization. So I think, if they could open all over the country, that would be really helpful because they're very, very committed to the idea that that our system just throws these poor children out into the world with nothing, and
Yeah.
we need to keep continuing, having gotten that far, they're strong and they're resilient, and we need to support them as they enter adulthood. So there are organizations that do that, and that's one that I know of that I highly recommend.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. We are going to leave it there with
Okay.
the message of being strong, resilient, finding an alignment, and with the hope that you in turn will be able to sparkle from these messages that we've learned today. Thank you,
Oh,
Valerie,
thank you. It was a
for
pleasure.
this conversation. I really enjoyed it, and you'll be back. We have other things to talk about, so
Good.
I'm really really excited about the future partnership of Cake Therapy Podcast, Cake Therapy Foundation, and the Depressed
Definitely.
Cake Shop. So thank you so much for coming today.
Absolutely. And we should get some of my board members. We should just do a Zoom with Ella and Courtney and some of the other women and see what we can, yeah, I'm sure we can conspire and do something great.
Of course. Yeah, let's get to
Okay.
it.
Well, it's so nice to meet you. Thank you so
Oh,
much for finding us.
yeah, thank you for joining me. So thank you guys
It was
for
my
joining
pleasure.
for joining the Cake Therapy Podcast, your slice of joy and healing.
Thank you for tuning in to the Cake Therapy Podcast. Your support means the world to us. Let us know what you thought about today's episode in the comment section. Remember to subscribe wherever you get your podcast. And if you found the conversation helpful, please share it with a friend. Also, follow Sugar Spoon Desserts on all social media platforms. We invite you to support Cake Therapy and the work we do with our foundation by clicking on the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description or by visiting the Cake Therapy website and making a donation. All your support will go towards the Cake Therapy Foundation and the work we are doing to help women and girls. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next episode.